and review. Amazing. Right. Thank you so much, Dan. So first of all, could you please walk our readers through your journey and what is your motivation to embark on this sector?
Sure. My background was as an electrical engineer, and I was involved starting a business in early internet technology. And this was design and manufacturing of electronic products. And I ran that business for 10 years. During that period of time, I also learned to fly. And so this was in the 80s and 90s, and the state of the art of technology for light aircraft at that time was, certainly by current standards, very primitive. And as somebody who was familiar with building a business, building electronic products, and also familiar with the state of the instrumentation in light aircraft, I saw an opportunity to be involved with the creation of a new generation of instrumentation that would, take advantage of, powerful computers and light LCD displays and, the latest software technology and databases and so forth. And so after my first business went public, and then we acquired another business, and so I gradually left to start Avidyne. And our mission then was, and still is, really to use advanced technology to make flying easier and safer for all different kinds of pilots, whether they're essentially owner flown or professionally flown or public operations or any kind of things. Our core belief is that by making the instrumentation and automation better, you make it easier and safer to fly aircraft. And that's been a trend. We've been a pioneer in the lighter aircraft, but that's been true on military and larger aircraft over that same period. So I think that's been, really strongly validated.
Right. So speaking about the company, can you please share a brief introduction about your company and how it was actually, established at the first place?
So I started the business in, about 95 or 96, and started to, got a couple of people working along, and we were trying to build a higher capability display product than existed in the market. And so we built a prototype of our first product, and we showed it at the big general aviation event that happens every year in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is called AirVenture, which actually was just last week. And we had this bright, colorful display that was fast and easy to use and larger than what people were used for. And the response was immediately a lot of interest from owners and aircraft manufacturers. So that's when that was kind of a test, a market test of the concept, and we considered it a success. And so in this business, the first product that we showed was not certified or anything like that. It was just kind of a market test. And so we decided, it's probably going to be worth the investment, and there'll be market interest in building a certified version of this product and bringing it into the market. And that's what we did over the next couple of years, resulting in our first certification. Tom, you may know this off the top of your head, but I think it was in 98 or 99. And that product was a success, and it led to numerous other variations. But the company, I originally started it outside of Boston, and we got an office near an airport, and so we could go over to the airport and try things out. And we still have an office near that airport, although the business sort of center of gravity over the years has moved to Florida, where we have a big operation in Melbourne, Florida, which is kind of in the Space Coast, which is where all just south of NASA, and all kinds of things go on there that are in aerospace. So it's a good location. So really, I'd say in terms of inception, the idea was based on my flying around with the then current generation of instruments in say the 1990s, and having familiarity with what was available and possible in terms of building electronics that might be used to replace these mechanical instruments, and what it would take to start a business to do that. And so that's how we got started.
Yes, amazing. So it seems like Avidyne has, been established itself as a pioneer in the aviation industry. But in terms of the unique selling point, what would you say distinguish the company from other competitors in this space?
I think we try and be one of, if not the leading innovator in instrumentation and light aircraft. So I would say, there are other businesses that certainly have interesting products. We try and have, something innovative that we do in each product. And the other thing I would say that is a key factor in our industry is that, we're making life safety products or life critical products because they're being used by people who themselves are flying airplanes and they have passengers. And there's a significant regulatory oversight because of that fact. And so not only do we try and innovate on the product side in terms of creating innovative new products that help people fly more safely, but we also innovate on the regulatory side, which is finding ways to get products defined and certified that are maybe not common in the industry. And so so that's what makes us different than dozens and dozens of other companies that make an interesting electronic product. Ours has a heavy regulatory oversight factor, and so we try and have some kind of a balance between being innovative but also being certifiable, and that's sort of been our key. I'd say differentiator over the years. I'd also say that because of the regulatory oversight, and this industry moves maybe a little bit slower than some others, and it has quite a bit of legacy businesses and tradition. So it's quite difficult to be a new entrant. Obviously, we're not that new anymore. We've been around for 25 plus years. But I think that is kind of generally the case in this industry, is that there's pretty high barriers to entry for new companies.
Interesting. So you mentioned about the high barrier to entry for new entrants, about how the company has been able to navigate the very heavily regulated industry. So it's very interesting. Here, Dan, can you please share with the readers, how have you navigated the evolving technological and regulatory environment in the aerospace and aviation sector? Can you please give us, the readers, some example to help us understand how the company has navigated this complex landscape?
Well, I'd say that at big picture level, it's the kind of people that we've built the team around. So we have both in our company, we have people who have lived in aerospace their whole lives, and they have the traditional outlook, which is very important and valuable. And we also have technological innovators who have innovated in lots of other areas unconstrained by aerospace. And so you have a kind of a contrast there between people who say, well, we can pretty much do anything, and other people say, well, the regulations are going to drive us to do things a certain way. And so trying to create a balance there for people to have, really aggressive and innovative ideas, but also to be informed by what's possible on the certification side. I'd say that's sort of kind of from a, we've done this over and over and over again, and all kinds of different technologies. And the reason is we've had people who are familiar with what's been done in the industry and people who are really on the leading edge of the technology, and that's what's enabled us to do that.
Mm.
So to make one example, I think, which is interesting, one of the primary instrumentation functions in an airplane is the thing that tells you essentially your pitch and roll, or your attitude with respect to the Earth and the horizon. And this had been done in the past by mechanical gyros. And there had been electronic systems developed to do this in the time frame when we were doing it, but they were really, really expensive and heavy, and we're never going to make it into a small aircraft. So we looked around and said, what kind of sensors are out there that are being manufactured in volume at decent quality that maybe could do this? And we found that at that time you had a lot of work going into automobile stability systems, things like anti-lock and anti-spin and so forth. And there were companies developing and building in mass quantities sensors that were being used for these systems. These sensors were not aimed at the aerospace industry, and quite frankly, as they came off their production line, they were not quite at the level that we needed in terms of performance for our application of building attitude indicators. So what our team did at the time, and it was really a transformational change, was they said, we can come up with a way to process these sensors and calibrate them and sort them and screen them and use sophisticated filters so that we can use sensors that are 2 orders of magnitude less expensive than what's going into the higher end aircraft, and bring a capability that was acceptable into our class of airplanes. And that created one of the elements of the entire electronic instrumentations, or so-called glass cockpits that are in aircraft. And that's just one example where we looked at what we wanted to accomplish in the market space we wanted to accomplish it in, and said, the way that people are doing it now isn't really going to work for us. So how can we inject some new technology in here? Maybe it wasn't designed exactly for what we're doing. I mean, another really great example is LCD displays. When we started off, the displays were CRTs, which are big and heavy, and they don't last that long. And of course, LCDs were exploding for laptops, and eventually desktop screens, and then eventually TV sets, and eventually basically everything was a flat panel screen. But we said, we got to adapt these things for aircraft. What does that mean? Well, that means they got to be a lot brighter, and they got to be more rugged. You have a lot more sunlight issue in an airplane. And so those are the kinds of things we said, well, this is a great technology, but as it stands, it's not really perfect for what we need to do. So we need to adapt it into our use. And we've done that, and now others have done that, and now it's the standard thing to do. But we were one of the first to do it. So there's been numerous technologies that have come along where, or I'd say opportunities that have come along where we've taken a existing technology developed for other purposes, and we have essentially augmented in a fashion that makes it appropriate to going in aircraft.
Yes. So that's really interesting, the fact that the company has been continuously staying very close to the customer and observing all the pinpoints that they are having and trying to come up with the solutions that can solve the existing pain points through all the examples that you've given to us to understand more about how the company has been staying very adaptive and very attentive to the demands of the customers. Right. So is there any particular reason, particular challenges that you have faced as a leader in this industry? And can you please share with us an example of how you overcame these challenges?
Well, as I said, this industry has significant barriers to entry, both in terms of the regulatory environment and in terms of the customer environment. So, I think overcoming them has been one of our big challenges, and I think we did that by a mixture of having a great team and by using some creativity in how we did it. I'd say that this is a business where there are giants in the industry, and so as a smaller business, we have to be able to have some advantages against the large companies. So we have to be more nimble, and we have to be lower cost, and we have to be more open to new things. And so we've tried to do that. There's some very good, very big companies, but there's still an opportunity for smaller players like ourselves to be very relevant in the business, and we've been able to do that.
Interesting. Right. So, in terms of the sustainability and environmental considerations, can you please share with us how the company has incorporated all of these, like criterias or methodologies in ensuring the future of the aerospace and aviation industry?
Well, there's a whole host of things. I mean, I'll give you two that are kind of at pretty opposite ends of spectrums. This is just for our local environment. When we built our production facility, we built it to be a totally clean process. There is no waste products whatsoever that come out of our production process. We don't wash things and end up with dirty water. We don't do any of that kind of thing. So at one level, that's just kind of in our facility. We have a very clean operation. Now, at a bigger industry level, certainly one of the big things going on for sustainability in aviation is electrification of aircraft. And electrification of aircraft is going to happen for small aircraft first because of the nature of the problem. And, so we have been very active with a number of companies who have been building or electrifying aircraft. And we are not building the core components, but what we do is we adapt the things that we do, which are communication, navigation, surveillance, flight controls, flight displays, all of those things for this new generation of either hybrid or pure electric aircraft. And so we're working with a number of the innovators there and supporting their efforts. One of the most interesting elements about this is that a significant part of the display in an aircraft is the propulsion system and the electrical power system. And on these new aircraft, those systems are completely different. So the displays of that information to the pilot has to be completely different. And we've been involved with the development of that. There's something that in our industry is referred to now as an umbrella term of advanced air mobility, which covers a lot of things. It covers things like fly-by-wire and simplified vehicle operations, which is making the current generation of aircraft much easier to fly. There's a lot going on with automation. So aircraft that can fly remotely operated or autonomously. Again, that's using both typical existing aircraft and also newly developed aircraft. And then there's a lot going on with next generation propulsion. That's mostly electric and hydrogen and hybrid. So we're involved in all of those different activities. And I think that as an industry, you see a commitment towards sustainable. One of the things about this industry is that aircraft get more and more efficient every year, which means that they become more sustainably by their nature. But I think you're seeing people saying, we need to transition in technologies over the next 20 or 30 years, and we're certainly participating in quite a bit of that. And I happen to be a very strong believer that these projects, such as electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that are used in a city or urban environment, or maybe in a regional air mobility environment, I happen to think that they will over time be very successful. There's a number of companies that are out there that are pioneering this, and there's a certain amount of skepticism. I think they will be successful. I know it'll be difficult. I know I've gone through starting a business in this environment and been through the regulatory element, but there's some really great founders out there doing some great things with these businesses, and I think they'll be successful. And I think it'll make a difference over time.
Yes, amazing. Great. Thank you so much for sharing these details. Let's switch gears a bit, and we'd love to understand more about your leadership strategies at the company. So for your organization, can you please share with us your approach to building and leading a high-performing and as well as innovative teams in the aerospace and aviation industry?
I think that one of there's several things that kind of contribute to our culture. One is we have a culture of mutual respect for each other. We have people with all kinds of different, like I mentioned, technical or regulatory backgrounds, also, obviously across the functions of manufacturing and marketing and sales and all of that. And so everybody, we try and work together as a team and not be siloed or competitive inside the company. And I think that's good. I also think, like, in terms of creating innovation, we kind of foster an environment where people say, why don't we try this? And, crazy ideas are something that people, get to have discussed. And obviously not all of them happen, but, it's an environment where people can say, why is it, can we try to do this and go off and maybe try and do a prototype or something or whatever. And, then you get a whole bunch of eyes on and people say, hey, that's a pretty interesting idea. Or, you know what, that's really not going to work. But we encourage that kind of activity, throughout the business of, what if this, what if that, could we try this, could we try that? And I think that that keeps people who are, a lot of the work is work that people have done before, but that keeps things interesting for people. I'd say the other thing that we do in our environment, I think that keeps things interesting is, when we get a new project that we're working on, a lot of times it's not that we get new people to work on it. We take people who are experts at something else and say, how'd you like to do this thing that you really don't know that much about? And people who are, interested in learning and challenging themselves love to be in that situation. They love to be trying something new. And so I think by doing that, you do foster a level of innovation, but also, sort of, I think, a level of team member satisfaction because they get to try new things.
Yes, always encourage the new ideas, right? And but in a mutually respectful manner is what you are trying to cultivate in the company.
Yeah, that's
right?
absolutely right.
Yeah. How about, like risk management and the importance of effective decision making? How do you incorporate, and what are some of the insights or lessons that you've learned for these? Yeah.
Well, we manufacture safety critical products, and when we have to be very, very sensitive to how they're operating in the field, because if there's issues with the products, it could create a safety issue. So this is true for any reasonable aerospace enterprise. You have to be very safety oriented, and we are. And so, when we sell a lot of products and we get a lot of input, there's a lot of people, talking to our tech support or our salespeople or whatever it may be. We also, a lot of us fly this stuff ourselves. And when something isn't right, you have to say, okay, well, I mean, no complex product is perfect, but this is not, this question about perfect. The question is there a safety issue here? And so, if we come across something that we don't like from a safety perspective, it's going to get very, very rapid attention in the company. And also, there's regulatory requirements for us to, go through certain regulatory processes if we think we see an issue in our products, not just in the way could be in the way they're manufactured, could be the way they're designed, could be the way they're being used, could be the way they're being installed. We have, which may or may not be something we have direct control over, but since we're the manufacturer, we have to be very sensitive to that. And so, you have to have a safety culture where people they know that they're empowered to say, we got to take a look at this and see if we have an issue here. So we definitely have that, and any decent aerospace company is going to have that, because you really have to, when you're in the business that we're in. These products are safety critical. And so, there's a balance there. Every little last thing, every little last nit that anybody says, hey, you could try and change it and make it what they might think better in a certain fashion. And can't do everything. So you have to balance out the safety critical things go to the very top of the list right away automatically. And then you've got, essentially improvement requests or new ideas that come in, and we evaluate them. Does this apply to a broad enough audience to make it interesting? Is it technically feasible? What can we do? We get a lot of interesting ideas from our, fairly huge customer base now.
Yes. So striking a balance between operational efficiency and safety measures, right? So let's take a step back and from your perspective as an experienced individuals who have spent many, many years in this aviation industry. So what do you see as the most exciting and or promising developments on the horizon for the aerospace and aviation industry? And how is your organization positioning itself to capitalize on these opportunities?
So I think we're in the dawn of maybe the third great era in aviation, where the first great era was, the propeller-driven aircraft, very manual, not much going on in the way of instruments and so forth. The second part was the jet age, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that went on with respect to control systems and instrumentation, which were a huge improvement on the past. But now I think we're starting a new age where the ability of new kinds of propulsion, kind of centered around electric, and it can be electric distributed propulsion, or it can be hybrid, or there's all kinds of different configurations. This is enabling new configurations of aircraft, like electric vertical takeoff and landing with tilt rotors, or with lifting rotors and forward propulsion rotors, or electric jets. There's a company in Germany building a company with a whole bunch of small electric jets on it. And then in our case, it all has to do with kind of electronics control systems and communications. So right now, other than certain military drones, aircraft are not really connected to the ground that much. I mean, yeah, you can get internet in the back of JetBlue, but in terms of the control of the aircraft, you talk over an AM radio to an air traffic controller on the ground. It's really, really primitive. So I think that one of the really big trends that's going to happen in the next couple of decades will be a much, much closer integration of the operation of the aircraft, control of the aircraft, with ground operations capabilities that make it much easier and safer. In some cases, it may make it so that there's aircraft that currently have pilots that won't have them in the future. The first application for that is going to be moving freight around, because that's a much less of a life safety thing, moving, because you don't have passengers on the aircraft. But there are companies working to do completely remotely operated passenger carrying aircraft, and I think that they'll be successful, and that'll be a huge change. And we hope to participate in that by supplying, some of the core elements that they need for their communication, navigation, surveillance, control systems, and displays in the air and also on the ground stations that will become a bigger and bigger part of this future world. So I think you've got a number of different technologies that are sort of coming to fruition at around the same time, and I think that this is what's going to drive the third major generation of aviation over the next 20 or 30 years. And we're not going to be we're not building an airplane, but we get to participate in a lot of really interesting aspects of this.
Yes, that's very interesting. Thank you, Dan, so much for sharing. I believe that based on your experience and with the legacy rooted in innovation and relentless pursuit of enhancing aviation safety and efficiency, Avidyne will continue to set the standard in this industry, and I will show it is. So I think that also concludes the interview for today. I've gone through all the question list that we have proposed to you. It's a very effective meeting, to be honest. If there's anything that I've missed out or that you would like to include in this edition, please feel free to let us know, and we are more than happy to incorporate in the storyline as well. But otherwise, I think that's a very effective interview. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for your time and interest, and look forward to seeing things. And hopefully, it's also been interesting at a personal level, because this is definitely something that is going to be relevant to really a lot of people in terms of how they move around over the next couple of decades.
Exactly. Yes. I'm very excited with all the innovation that's coming up in this space. And I personally very like your background. I was intended to say from the very first. Yeah. But thank you so much, Dan and Tom, for taking the time to sit down with me today. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
I
Well,
Thank you.
thanks, Dan.